appreciate that song. I love the way that song ends, and the fact that it doesn't end. It kind of has that battle's ongoing, and God's still involved in the battle. It is good to be here this evening. I mean that in more ways than you can imagine. Right at what time did I call you, Mike? Where'd Mike go? Mobley, he had to step out. I called Mike about 4 o'clock this afternoon going, Mike, can you preach tonight? He goes, what's up? I got a question for you. How fast can an 8-year-old Shih Tzu run? Faster than a 57-year-old man. That story begins. Miss Pam's been in search of we've been petless. We finally got the empty nest going on at the house, and now we've been petless for a while. Mama's been looking. We found a rescue dog out of South Carolina, met the family this afternoon at the Gastonia Mall, took the wonderful, beautiful, calm, quiet little girl to Dean and Hillary's house for just a moment as we were getting ready to come on back here. That was around 2 o'clock. About 2 o'clock. Getting ready to go outside. She had been so calm, she hadn't walked further than from here to there the whole time we'd seen her. Took her outside, set her down, and she bolted. I spent the rest of the afternoon looking through the neighborhood. Hey, Lucy, Lucy, Lucy. I didn't know. She looked like a jackrabbit going away from me. Found her at the house. She'd finally run as far as she could go. A lady had found her and was giving her water and food. So Lucy has been found. Traumatized, moved from a home. It had been a very quiet home she had been in for several years. And so Mom is at home comforting the poor dog. And I'm just so grateful because at moments I thought I had lost her dog. I've had a rough week with items. You'll have to ask me about that story later. I don't have time to tell you that. But there have just been some items that have gone from me this week. And God's just trying to get stuff means absolutely nothing. Dogs mean a lot. But it was precious as Mom and Papa were reunited. Family. So I'm sharing tonight the lesson that I put together for the Concord Church of Christ Wednesday night. Josh Nettles, one of the deacons there, called me and said there's a book that's out written by Ed Dozier called Built by the Lord, a Study of the Family. A really good book. If you're looking at reading some books, and it's based on the passage from Psalm 127 verse 1, except the Lord build the house, the labor in vain to build it. And his bottom line thought is that the family is the core of anything. It's the core of the church. It's the core of the world. And a lot of the research has shown the reason the world's going the way it's going is because the family's gone by the wayside, and that we have lost some of our core values as families. Now, that's not true of the folks in this audience, but we struggle as families, and there's no doubt that the world struggles in families, and we live in a world that even the definition of family has changed. And God's not changed that. It's still the same. It was one man, one woman. That's the way it was meant from the beginning of time. We're not going to spend any time developing that thought. But I wanted to introduce this the same way I did there, and looking at, if I were to ask everybody in this room this question, pretty much, I know everybody, we've got a couple of visitors, but I think the answer would be yes. Do you have a Christian world view? Now, you may or may not know exactly what that means. And I'm going to give you a definition in a moment of what that is. I'm going to explain to you first. George Barna, in his research, has done some research in the family. And his findings were astounding. They were scary in a level. See, the question that's asked in the world, and one of the initial questions that he asked was, do you have a Christian worldview? 46% of the people initially responded yes. Now that number in itself makes you go, what? 46%? That's out of the individuals surveyed. Now I know some of you already way ahead of me go, who did he survey? He surveyed from what looks like a very broad spectrum and got a fairly representative response in that as far as the world is concerned. You go, well, 46% is pretty high. But once he asked them the questions that would determine whether the individual had a Christian worldview or not, it dropped from 46% to 4%. biblical Christian worldview. You go, well, that's a few. And you're right. 9% claim to be born-again believers of that same group. And of course, that would be Protestant mostly individuals. That wouldn't include those outside of the Protestant religions or either any other world religions. Although most people own the Bible and know some of its content, our research found that most Americans have little idea of how to integrate core biblical principles to form a unified and meaningful response to the challenges and opportunities of life. And this is part of that research, and that's the reason I'm kind of using this to kind of be accurate with what was represented. A worldview is the framework from which we view reality and make sense of life in the world. It's an ideology, a philosophy, a theology, a movement or religion that provides an overarching approach to understanding God, the world, and man's relations to God, the world. That's David Noble, author of Understanding the Times. For example, and I love the way he put this, a 2-year-old believes he's the center of the universe. 2-year-old's perspective, his worldview is, it's all about me. You take care of me. If you're not taking care of me, I'll let you know you need to be taking care of me. That's a 2-year-old. A secular humanist believes that the material world is all that exists. Buddhist believes he can be liberated from suffering by self-purification. Someone with a biblical worldview believes his primary reason for existence is to love and serve God. Now, I ask you again, do you believe that you have a Christian, a biblical world view? Is that the way you see the world? Is it the reason I exist is to love and to serve God? It makes it a little more myopic, doesn't it, when you start defining what does it mean by biblical worldview? Well, the questions even did more so. The questions were these on the survey. Now, what was cool about Concord is they wanted to answer all these. Okay, you all know all the answers to these. You don't have to do that. This is a little different than that class setting. I love the fact that they were just wanting to let me know, we know the answer to that one. Because all the answers to these are obvious to Christians. But you ask this question on the street, does absolute truth exist? And what are you going to hear on the street? Most people say no. There is no such thing. Everything is what? I'm going to kind of turn this into a class. I can do that. I have that option. I can say this is class-like tonight. What is, most individuals look at truth. It's not absolute. It's what? Y'all knew the word. So you know the word because that's out there. That's what everybody's talking about. There's no absolute truth. It's all relative. It depends. It's whatever the situation is or whatever the need is. That determines the accuracy or the inaccuracy of truth. No, it doesn't. Truth is absolute. There are some things God says that are always going to be this way, that are never going to change, that are going to be as they have been since the beginning and until He comes. You can't change it. Now, you can think it's different. You can come up with alternate terminology. You can change definitions, but it doesn't change the truth. Other question, is absolute truth defined by the Bible? Oh my word, you go even more there, right? Because, well, if someone would agree that there's absolute truth and you say, is it defined by the Bible? They go, no, not that old book. Not that archaic bunch of gathered letters written by a variety of individuals. How could that be absolute truth for me? That doesn't apply to me. Did Jesus Christ lead a sinless life? See where these are headed? I mean, you've got to have a rock bed faith in God and the Bible and believe that all of these are absolute. Is God the all-powerful and all-knowing creator of the universe? Again, you ask it. And you can see how the Concord people are going, yes, yes. That's the answer that we immediately give. That's not the answer you're going to hear outside. That's not the answer that our kids are hearing at school. That's not the answer that they're hearing at the college level. Is Satan real? Now, you'd be amazed at the recent research that's been done within our fellowship. I'm not talking about the world as a whole or even religion as a whole. I'm talking about within the body of Christ. Individuals that have been asked, is Satan real? And it's dropped from 89% as it would have been 10 years ago to most recently 61% of individuals who are members of the family of God. Because you can tell people, it's like I said this morning, one of the things, if you practice something often enough, you'll believe it. If you're told something often enough, all of a sudden, it starts to chip away at what you thought was real. Is the Bible accurate in all its teaching? Again, okay, I'll do the answer to every one of these is what? You know the answers. Yes. Right? The answer is yes. Without a doubt. Or it better be without a doubt, or you don't have a biblical worldview. But that's why that's 4% of the individuals interviewed. Now you go, well, what in the world does that have to do with the family? It has everything to do with the family. Our view of what is absolute truth, our view of what is right and wrong, our view of God as a sovereign creator and sustainer of life, and the Bible being the only guide that we have. The Christian worldview. What does it mean? Now, here is one, and I'd like for you to maybe kind of assess yourself. This is one person's statement of what that Christian worldview is. You may have one that's maybe even more fine-tuned. Personal worldview is a combination of all you believe to be true. And what you believe comes the driving force behind every emotion, decision, and action. Therefore, it affects your response to every area of life, from philosophy to science to theology to anthropology, economics, law, politics, art, and social order. Everything. And if everything is not focused and centered around God, Jesus Christ, and the Bible, then we do not have a Christian or biblical worldview. Well, let's look at some passages. Why does that matter? Well, turn to Colossians 2:8. We're actually going to read a little more. I put 2:8 on here and ended up reading more the other night. So as time allows, I'm going to read. Paul in Colossians is trying to establish the mind of Christ. That's what he ends up at the end of chapter 3. We have the mind of Christ. It's been revealed. We have all the truth, all the information that we need. And so his warning to people in the world is, okay, if you're going to view, because you walk onto the street and say, what's a family? And I told them, I'm going to age myself tremendously here. I believe one of the first times I remember, and when I thought back to it, one of the programs that to me started, and some of you are going to have a different program, and maybe this is just my brain, the way some thinks in it, but the program that forever started to switch the way people looked at family and give them a different perspective was the show Three's Company. Now, they all responded differently than y'all did to that. Maybe got a different on it. Because I know y'all have seen it. Right? Remember that, Three's Company? You remember the fact that they could get you to laugh at something that was wrong? And now every program since then, and there have been very few family programs that have depicted family as God has depicted it. Husband, wife, children, where they have been in a good relationship with each other and interacting in a way that is going to, what family interacts in any kind of a decent, good way? We're all kind of dysfunctional in one sense because we're not perfect families. And I'm not presenting tonight God's ideal is perfect families, because there are all kinds of families that work. Single parent families that work. That it's not the way God intended, but they work. Ideally, in its best setting, in its best scenario, it is the family as God intended it. But Satan has, through the years, been so adept at creating environments where when we look at something that's wrong, but make us laugh at it, that it's less offensive. And that we have a tendency not to be as offended by it as we normally would. And of course, that was the show. It was an innocent, the individual actually wasn't homosexual, he just appeared to be so, and we found that entertaining. Funny, and some of you go, I never found that entertaining. And that's great. I'm just saying the way the world looked at those particular programs, and what has happened through the years is Satan has been able to make us look at things in a different way and to laugh at what is wrong instead of be offended by what is wrong. And that is a subtle mechanism that Satan has used through the years. And so when you start looking at Colossians 2, here's the warning. Yeah, I'm going to start at verse 1. We're going to just take a little bit of time here. For I want you to know what a great conflict I have for you, and those in Laodicea, for as many as have not seen my face in the flesh, that their hearts may be encouraged, being knit together in love, and attaining to all riches of the full assurance of understanding, to the knowledge of the mystery of God, both of the Father and of Christ. And notice what he says, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. In who? In God and Christ. You ask individuals, where do you need to go to get information for life? They'll give you a whole bunch of sources. God says God has them. There's a passage in Peter that says we have all things that pertain to life and godliness. He goes further in verse 4. Now this I say, why? Lest anyone should deceive you with persuasive words. For though I am absent in the flesh, yet I am with you in spirit, rejoicing to see your good order and the steadfastness of your faith in Christ. As you there have received Christ the Lord, so walk in Him. What you've heard, what you've seen, he'll say that in the passage. What you've seen us exhibit in Jesus, you do those things. Rooted and built up in Him and established in the faith as you have been taught, abounding in it with thanksgiving. What? In the knowledge and the information that God has given. Verse 8, beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. For in Him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and you are complete in Him, who is the head of all principality and power. God knows all, has all power, and so that's the source that we have. Any other source is invalid. Any other information outside of biblical information is sketchy at best. And that's why when you look at the family, how did God design the family to impact the world? We're not going to get near as far as I got the other night at Concord. Romans 12, you know this text. I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies, what? Living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. What? Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do we renew our minds? We renew our minds by the mind of Christ. And I know this is, I'm preaching to the choir. It's what I told they're the Wednesday nighters there at Concord. They're here on Wednesday night. You know this already. And so what's the purpose? The purpose is this. The better we're equipped to help those who struggle, and the better we understand the concepts of family. And as I said, we're gonna look. One of the essentials in family development is that we've got to understand that it takes time to develop a good family. Deuteronomy 6 through 7. He talks about a concept, and you can look at Deuteronomy 6. We may not look at every one of these texts just for sake of time, but I do want to look at Deuteronomy 6. And you remember, this is the text where he's proclaiming them, beginning in verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. And here's the key, the time. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and there shall be as a frontlet between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. That's why in this guy in the book, entitled Built by the Lord, a Study of the Family, says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain who build it. It's got to be built on the Lord. And it takes time on a regular basis. I've told you guys part of our story as a family. That we went back, I didn't go to church officially till I was a junior in high school. But something dawned on me that I didn't realize, but, and even it was into my middle junior year when we went back to church, that Dad started every night at the house. We had a Bible reading and prayer time together, and there was a devotional at the house. He used to be really frustrated, especially when I started working and I'd get in late. He said, "You're missing that time." He'd fuss at me about that. But one of the things I noticed early on, when I went to State Street Church of Christ first, went to Mountain View Church first, which is over near Bluntwood in Bluff City, Tennessee, I'd go to Bible classes. I knew the Bible stories. I could answer the questions. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, my mom must have, as a kid, taught me those stories. Because all of a sudden I was sitting in the Bible and we'd read the stories of Abraham and Moses and Joseph, and I knew all those stories. That had not been something I had studied in high school or middle school, but all of a sudden those stories, I'd heard those as a kid from my mom, who, even though we weren't going to church, was making sure that we were being told the stories of the Bible, the stories of faith. It only dawned on me just a few months ago when I was sitting there going, I remember now going and being amazed that I knew those stories and I never studied them. But I'd had a mom, I'm sure. It may have been Dad, but I doubt it. I doubt it. I bet most likely it was my mom as we were younger, reading the Bible stories to us as kids. When you walk through the house, when you rise up, when you lie down. We have said this for years, and you know this. And again, I'm talking to the choir in one sense. You know I'm using that term in a sense of group faith. It is so essential that at a young age, children know God and have that ingrained within them. And that's why I think in Deuteronomy, he said one of the keys, in fact, there are various religions. I'm not going to name it, but there are various religions. One particular one said, you give me your child young, and by the time he's 8 years old, he'll never leave. And there's a great deal of truth to that ability to indoctrinate and teach someone to get in their minds and their hearts so settled that God is God and Jesus is the Son of God and the Bible is the inspired Word of God. Maybe we need to go back. Maybe we need, because one of the scariest passages in all of Scripture is found, I believe it's in the early part of Numbers, when it said, there arose a generation that knew not God. We've got to make sure that time is spent in teaching and indoctrinating our children. Deuteronomy 24:5 is another text that talks about time in a very special, precious way in our relationships. I'm 24:6, 24:5. When a man has taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war, be charged with any business. He shall be free at home 1 year and bring happiness to him as his wife, whom he has taken. Did y'all know that was in the Bible? Early on in the Levitical code, when you got married, you could honeymoon for a year. Go to your employer and tell them that now. I just got married, I'm going to take a year. Oh, no, you're not. Why is that important? It's in the Levitical code. It was so important for those two to spend that quality time together. Later, the Corinthian writer will even go into detail about the intimate relationship. Don't deprive each other because you'll be tempted. Ephesians 6:4. And Ephesians is where we're going to be for the rest of the evening, by the way, if you want to turn over there. Ephesians 6, verse 4. And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. That does not happen without significant time. And I would ask you the same question I asked. Why do mothers not have to be told that? Why do you think it is that Paul in Ephesians said, fathers, bring up your children? Well, it's one of our responsibilities, absolutely. But mothers don't have to be told to mother. We've got to be reminded of that responsibility. because we're easily distracted. We're going to talk about a little bit of that here in just a minute. Time is so crucial. 1 Peter 3 and verse 7 in reference to our relationship with each other. 1 Peter 3, husbands likewise dwell with them with understanding, giving honor to the wife as the weaker vessel, as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers may not be hindered. As being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers not be hindered. It takes time to pray. I think sometimes we give a little time to prayer, a moment or two to prayer. I know, and it may be just because of our journey over the last several years, I pray for my children on a more regular basis than I ever have before. I find myself in moments just going before the Father on behalf of them, their journeys and where they are and what they're doing and what they're potentially going to be doing. We spend that quality time in asking God and communicating with Him, because time is such a precious part of this. Time is signature. Just because the sake of time, I'm going to do the same thing I did, because you know these next things I'm going to talk about, because I want to get to another spot. If you'd like this later, I'll make it available to you. I've done that before, and so I'm going to apologize right up front, because I want to get somewhere with this. I maybe should have done this in a different manner. Fulfill our roles. Husbands, head of the home, loving his wife physically and spiritually. Ephesians 5 talks about those things. And what does that mean? What does it mean? Well, the key verse in Ephesians 5 is this, that we're to love our wives as Christ loved the church. I've not always done that. I'm not just saying that because she's not here. She can look at this video later. I've tried. I get distracted. Ministers any profession has its own hurdles that sometimes you get distracted from what should be more focused. There have been times in my ministry when I've been a minister before I've been a father, and I've made the wrong choice. There have been times in my life I've wondered if that's the reason Caleb, with all the talents that he has, hasn't gone into the ministry. He didn't want to do that to his wife. Because to love effectively as a husband, I'm going to give you one word. We must be sacrificial. If our wives know we'll do whatever we can in the world for them, there is no hesitance on their part of doing it. See, a lot of times we run to Ephesians, and I've done several recently, used to do more, and there's a couple coming up, premarital counseling. And inevitably, the husband gets in the room and says, make sure we go through Ephesians 5. And you know where he's headed with that. He's headed to that verse number 22 in chapter Ephesians 5. And you know what it says? It's the one that says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. I love the fact that what I'll do, and I've had an individual, I said, would you read the verse right before that for me, please? Submitting to one another in the fear of God. I've been in ministry now right out 41 years. Give or take a few years. That sounds like a long time. I've seen a host of families. I have never yet seen a relationship where if the husband loves the wife like Christ does, that the wife has any trouble doing what God's asked her to do. Because it's not about lordship. It's not about overpowering someone. It's about loving someone right. Husbands sacrificially. And that's the text. Wives submitting and honoring their husband's leadership, loving her husband. When she's loved right, she'll love right. Parents, loving their children, providing spiritual training, discipline. You know, it's one of those moments when you see things on television, when you see children mistreated, it just, it's one of those things that flies all over me, and just, I overreact in anger. Because I just don't understand. I can't comprehend anyone ever mistreating a child. Just beyond my comprehension. I know it happens, but we live in a society that is so misunderstood what genuine loving discipline is. The ability to tell someone no. The ability to lead someone in a careful, safely guarded path in a crazy, mixed up, dangerous, dark world. Children to obey and honor their parents. And I told the kids there on Concord, and a lot of kids, I looked them right now and said, kids, your parents are smart. They're very capable. I said, the programs you see and most of the communication you hear from the music world is parents that don't have a clue, but that is a lie. Because parents know, and they care at a level that no one else does. And we've got to be reminded of that in our families. Love is the key. One thing I didn't mention, because I was getting so ahead of myself, is in the book, he made a challenge. Do you remember that when God chose Abraham and Sarah, they were childless? By the time they leave Egypt, in Exodus 1:5, there's 70 of them. They grow into a nation in 20 years of 603,550 men based on the numbers record. 500,000 Christian family. Now his dream or his thought process, if God did it once, can he do it again? If we do our job, one of the most powerful things that I was reminded of was by an individual, and I cannot remember his name. It was at a seminar that we were at, and he said, if I don't share the message of the gospel with my grandchildren, I have failed as a father. And I kind of thought about that. I'm going, what do you mean? What he means by that is, that same thought I shared with you earlier, the scariest verse in the Bible is, there rose a generation that did not know God. It's possible. We assume too many things at times. I was so excited about our recent VBS and the success and the encouragement we got from sister congregations. I know was a part of that. But to see the potential of what can be. I'm excited about the enthusiasm that's created for next year and the great ideas that some individuals have had. And I want to tag on to that. Even if you weren't involved in VBS this year, come to lunch Sunday and be a part of this discussion and this potential. Because Bible class is where our growth is going to be. The children is where our reaching out into this community is going to occur. And the families will come. And here's my challenge to our teachers. We've had some times here recently. And I know sometimes we'll have one or two in a class, and maybe when it's a visiting family will come in, they go in and maybe a teacher's not there. Teachers, if you're teaching, be there if there's nobody there. And I know you're going to say, well, that's easy for you to say because you're teaching the class. You know everybody shows up. But we've got to be there. We've got to be ready at any moment, no matter what happens. I sound like I'm fussing. I'm not fussing. I'm just trying to get us to understand the importance, the vital importance of individuals knowing how important it is that we teach and share with their children. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7. I'm going to share some principles. Peace and stability. Helpfulness, humility, courtesy and respect, forgiveness, the benefit of the doubt. I'll go back. I had one more, didn't. These principles, as they're laid out in the context of 1 Corinthians, this is what love does. That's what home does. About 25 years ago at our youth rally, I got knitted a little thing. I think it's still in my office, amongst all that stuff that's in there. Home is where they have to take you in. That's what home's got to be. It's got to be that place where everything is as God would have it in its most effective way. See, God In the passage in Revelation 3:20, he says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'll come into him and dine with him and he with me." The end challenge of the book, built by the Lord, is this. Is Jesus on the outside of your home and family wanting in? Or have you let him in? Has the door always been open to him?